If you have said to yourself, I should write that, or if someone has said to you, you should write that, then I'm talking to you because you need to write. And that's why you're tuned in to Why Write. Hi, I'm your host, Angela Grout, and welcome to Why Write. This is a program that I put together to have conversations with other writers about writing to help you write your story. Because the story you have inside you can educate, inspire, and even entertain someone. So when you're ready to sit down with a pen and paper, which I hope is after this episode, you're going to start writing your story too. Today, I have a guest that is coming in from San Diego, California. So we are doing this via Zoom because the world has made it very convenient for that. So before I introduce her name, I want to tell you a little bit about her and how we met. I met this author at the International Women's Writers Guild last summer, and she had put out her very first book called, it's a memoir, and she teaches classes on memoir writing, and we will talk a little bit about that. But what's fascinating about her is that after over, I think, 30 years working in the corporate world, she decided that it was time to retire, and she began writing her memoir. And like so many people who say, oh, in retirement, I'm going to write that great novel. I'm going to write my memoirs. She's done it. So we're going to find out today how she's done that. She is from San Diego, California. She has been the president of the San Diego Writers, Memoir Writers for many years, and she is on the San Diego Writers and Editors Guild. She was born and raised in Mississippi, so we're going to find out how she got to San Diego for sure. And she is a grandmother of 10 children, 10 grandchildren, and we're going to hear about the children that she birthed very soon in a moment. So I want to introduce my friend Laura Engel. Now, Laura Engel is Engel, and she actually was a little bit of an actress for me at the International Women's Writers Guild, as I had my play COVID Times performed, and she was able to play a character which I created called Hope Joy. So, ladies and gentlemen, the woman who writes her memoir, which does bring hope and joy to many, but she has written her memoir called You'll Forget This Ever Happened: Secrets, Shame, and Adoption in 1960. Laura Engel. Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Angela. It is just an honor to be here with you today. It's so good seeing you again.
Yes, it's really great to see you.
It's been a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's been almost a year, and we both follow each other on Facebook and send each other messages, so we have been in contact. And it's closed the world a little bit, made us all a little bit closer with being part of the Women's Writers Guild for the internet, the IWWG, so that we do have like this sisterhood, and, we can get to know each other. And the fact that we met in person is even great. I see behind you, you have your book that, the cover. Oh, good. You hold it up.
I have one right here.
Yes. So I love the title. You'll Forget This Ever Happened. And I know we will never forget that this interview happened. So tell us a little bit about, why you picked that title and what our book is about.
Sure. Thank you. Well, when I retired, like you said, I'd been working in the corporate world forever, over 30 years. And I thought I would write a family history. So I went to some classes at libraries here locally in San Diego. I went to a couple of memoir writing classes just to figure out I was going to write a family history for my sons. I have 4 sons and 1 daughter. And I thought, I will just write this book and just a little, I won't publish or anything. I'll just do it for my children. Well, something was going to happen in my life that I never had dreamed. I guess I dreamed it, but I still didn't really believe it. When I was a young 17-year-old girl in Mississippi, I became pregnant. And in the 1960s, this was 1967, that was close to criminal. The boyfriend that I had didn't want any part of it. His family didn't either. My parents ended up sending me on the recommendation of our minister to an unwed mother's home in New Orleans, Louisiana. I had never spoke about it once I moved out here to California. I was only 18 when I moved out here and left Mississippi pretty quickly, just to get away from the whole memory of what had happened to me and the trauma. But I never really got over the trauma. Years and years went by. And even though I was quiet about it, never dreamed I'd write about it. Even in my journals, I would write N-O for New Orleans instead of writing exactly what had happened.
So the unwed mother's home where you gave birth was in New Orleans?
Yes,
Okay.
New Orleans, Louisiana. And so I just, I kind of had shelved that. I'd looked for my son over time, but it was always private. So I didn't have help from anyone. And my other children did not know about this son. My husband did, thank goodness. But what happened was my son found me. And it was like a miracle in my life. It was beautiful. Oh my gosh. It was like the most precious time.
When he found you, were you writing your memoir then?
No, I was writing.
Hadn't begun it yet.
I was writing the family history. The first thing I planned to write.
Okay.
And I was going to avoid the year 1967 in the family history.
Write the whole memoir, but just avoid 1 year.
It was such a secret in my life, such a dark, deep secret. And I felt so ashamed and so guilty and sad about the whole thing. And I went through many periods of grief. I never even talked to a therapist about this. And back in those days, they didn't even do any kind of, counseling, or where I was, they did nothing. They just kind of said, okay, you're going to forget this ever happened. Goodbye, that kind of thing. And it's all, one of those things that you push down. We all have things in our life that hurt us, but this was a huge, huge hurt that I couldn't even hardly go back to without just going into depression. So what happened was when my son found me, my husband said to me one day, about 2 weeks later, he said, that smile has not left your face. And by this time I'd already met my son. He'd flown out here. I was flying back there. It was just a beautiful reunion. So what happened was my husband says, why don't you write this? This would be good for you to write this. Even if you don't do anything with it, it'll be healing for you to write it. And I said, oh, no, I can't write about that time. It was too hard. And he said, well, that's probably why you should write about it. And he said, just try. So I went into this project thinking, I'm just going to write about this reunion, how beautiful it is, and how it's changed my life overnight. My other sons were so wonderful. My daughter, everyone was wonderful. My friends were so accepting. And once I started telling everyone about this secret son, it restored my faith in humanity. I don't know if I was still thinking it was 1967.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Back then there was that brainwash of,
yes,
the shame that
constantly shaming us at the unwed mother's home, as well as shaming myself.
Mm-hmm.
I hated myself for what had happened. So I kind of thought that everyone else would think she's not the good mother we thought she was. She's not the good person we thought she was. Because over the years, you would hear this. We'd go for walks, my friends and I, and if the subject of adoption came up, I would hear things like, oh, I could never do that. And, you hear that and you've done it. So you have this, you can't say, well, guess what? I did, because it would just open a can of worms. And so anyway, I started writing about it. And I went to my first memoir class for the San Diego memoir writers. And I started this certificate program. And I thought, I'm just going to write about the reunion. I'm going to maybe touch on what happened, but I'm not going to write about that experience. Well, the more I wrote about that experience.
Well, don't you find that's what happens is once you pick up a pen and you start writing, it just automatically flows and it comes out. And I think that's what's so magical about writing, and especially when you are writing your own memoirs, because things start to unfold in a new light for yourself, even if you're trying to write from your memory.
Yes, exactly. It is like my life, it was life-changing because all of a sudden I was healing myself by writing about this. And even if I just kept it to myself, my husband was right. It was bringing up things in me. I would wake up in the middle of the night and say, oh my gosh, I just remembered Linda at the home, or I just remembered that doctor, or I just remembered exactly what was happening because I pushed everything so far down. And so I began writing.
It's amazing you can keep a secret like that for I mean, I don't know how people do that. And I shared with you, I had a great aunt who went through this exact thing, and we didn't know about it until her daughter came to find her. Her daughter was over 50 at the time, and she had passed away. So they didn't get to meet like your happy story.
Yes.
But I mean, everyone in our family, no one knew. And she kept that secret to herself her whole life and died with it. And I'm so glad that, you're sharing it for yourself, but it's helping so many other people to hear this story.
It really is. And when you start writing, a lot of times, as you said, we have no idea what's going to end up on the page. But what did end up on the page was something that I never dreamed. It was something that would eventually help so many others. Because the more I wrote and the more I spoke about my story to writing groups, I began to have this feeling every time someone would come up to me afterward and say, thank you for talking about this. Yeah. I'm an adoptee, and I've never understood what could have happened to my mother. And she was in an unwed mother's home, or my sister, or my aunt, and this would go on and on. And people would come up to me and say all the time, you have helped me. And I thought, who would ever have dreamed me finally unloading the secret on the page would end up helping so many?
Yeah. I mean, you're sharing the journey that you went through that so many other women did go through, and their children want to know what they went through, and they won't know. So you become that mother figure for so many women. And I understand this because I was one of them, cannot talk about it. It was so traumatic that we were just like treated not like a criminal, but we were treated kind of like a criminal. And I was saying the whole time I was writing this book, I would say to my writing coach, because I ended up getting a writing coach after I began to see what a difference it made to take my classes. And so I had a writing coach who was an editor, thankfully. And I began to realize the more I was telling this story, even my editor had been an adoptee and had never looked for her mother. And what happened was it made me realize so many women still cannot talk about this. Yeah. And I get it. Yep. It's very hard to speak it out loud. And then once you do, it gets easier each time. It's been 6 years now, 6 years, and it's been so much easier for me every time I talk about it. But what happened was writing it, I was in such my little world of writing it. I ended up writing 5 drafts, if you can believe this. The first draft was so bad. I look at it now and go, oh my gosh, because usually your first draft is like the first time you do anything. Mm-hmm. And it's just not, you just put the facts down. Well, the second draft was so emotional. I thought if people read this, they will be like, I can't read this downer. So as I wrote, each draft evolved into more of what the real story was. There were good things. There were funny things. Mm-hmm. There was times you'll laugh when you read the book, and there was times you'll cry. And because it's real now, the book became real. The story became real. Yeah. So once I published it, then I was afraid. It's like, oh my gosh, all this work. Now what have I done? Everyone's going to read this. And well, not everyone. I wish everyone would read it. But they will. Everyone's going to read it after this.
The people that read it have reached out to me, and just, it has been amazing. The biggest joy I have is that my book has helped others. And that's the most important thing to me now. I'm glad.
I think all authors empathize with that. Is, we do know when we put our words out there, we're hoping that it helps someone, in some way.
That it touches somebody.
Yeah, your book.
I'm a huge reader. I read all the time. And reading has been an escape for me my whole life, since I was a little girl, for many reasons. I would go into the room with my book, and my world is the book. And I think that helped me a lot with writing. I don't know how someone who never reads could ever really write. because it's like almost osmosis. By the more you read, the more you're able to write your own
Oh,
thoughts.
100%.
Mhm.
Finding your own authentic voice, but also understanding what captivates an audience when you're
Yes.
reading something and you're transported into that story. And that does
Exactly.
happen in your story, where you're transported into this world of being that, unwed mother, having to go through giving up, a child for adoption, and then being reunited and having, that wonderful relationship that you did get with, your son for the past, 6 years. Um, you know, I find when I write memoir, and you can tell me if you think this is true, that when you're writing the memoir that you're living, like in the moment, it's one thing to write about a past experience. So when you write about what happened in the unwed mother's home, like that's a past experience. You can write down how you were feeling at the time, even maturely how you feel about it now. But when you're actually living in the moment of, meeting the son and writing this memoir, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult because you don't even know where the story's going.
Exactly. It was kind of hard to at first even figure out where to end it because the story was ongoing. My son found me through Ancestry DNA. And there's, of course, that part's in the book, but it was the most probably such a dramatic moment. It was the most, to me, almost earth shattering. When I looked down at my phone, it was at night. I was out in our back lot with our dogs, and I always take them out, at night to do their potty and everything. And I looked at my phone. My phone pinged, and I thought, "Oh gosh, who's calling me now?" And I looked down, or who is this? I was kind of in a grumpy mood, and I looked down, and it said Ancestry, and I thought, "Oh boy, Ancestry," because I'd been on there forever because I do a lot of genealogy, and I thought, "Oh, I don't want to. It's probably some cousin, third, fourth cousin. I'm not going to deal with this tonight." And then something said to me, "Maybe you should."
Intuition.
And I looked at it, and it said parent-child match.
Oh,
I almost fell to my knees. You know that saying, they fell to their knees? Now I know what it means. My knees gave out. I pulled myself up and read it, and there was an email, and I said, "Oh no," private email, and it said, I think we might be related. I think I was adopted, and I think we need to talk," or something like that. And I was just like, oh, like I forgot the dogs. I ran in the house. My husband said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" He thought something happened to the dogs. I couldn't speak. It was the most physically challenging thing. It was just, I was petrified. And now I can really relate to that feeling. So I wrote that scene. That was the first scene I wrote in my book because it was so fresh. But as time went on, as I wrote the book evolved into something totally different than what I thought it would. But what happened was, as I wanted to end it, it was 2017, and my son and his family spent their first Christmas with us. They, flew out here and spent Christmas with us. They were still in Louisiana, by the way.
okay. Okay.
He had never left
So
Louisiana.
he was born in New Orleans, stayed in Louisiana, was adopted in
Yes,
Louisiana. Oh, interesting.
his parents were in Alexandria, and so he was living in Baton Rouge with his wife, and at the time he was an assistant district attorney, and he was very successful. His family was, and he had had a great life. And so over that first year, 2017, we talked all the time, and had such a great relationship. And he gave me 3 more grandchildren, so that's we didn't have enough, so now we have 10. And so it was just a wonderful thing. And I thought, well, I think I'm going to end here. And of course, things went on with the story. I ended the book, and then I had to go through all the process. When you write a book and you're publishing it, you want it to be the best it can be.
Yeah.
And so you have it edited, and then you have it edited again, and it's such a process. And that's something I never even dreamed. As a reader, I loved authors, and I respected them so much that they could tell a story that just changed people's lives.
How long did it take you from starting the memoir, like actually going to that first writers group, to getting, pretty much a final draft from the editors ready to go to a publisher?
Okay, I started in 2017. actually March of 2017. I remember the first chapter I wrote. And then I finished it in 2020.
Okay, so
When
that's
I thought this is ready, the year of COVID. I had a lot of time. And I finished it and I thought, it's time. I've ended it at a beautiful time. And it almost sounded too good of an ending. It was just a beautiful ending. And so I thought, but the world needs more beautiful endings, right?
They do.
You don't need to have more drama.
No. And I think with memoir writing, sometimes it's, we know life goes on past the pages,
Yes.
but when you're doing that snippet of time, it's nice when it can end, right at a beautiful moment, because it does give you that feel good moment that we all need and we all seek for in our lives. Especially because a lot of memoir stories do start off with that tragedy in the beginning, and you're trying to work through the tragedy. And, not that it was, I mean, for you, it was a tragedy to give up this child, but it was what they did kind of at the time, so, but it's still like that tragedy that, gave you this happy ending.
Yes. And it was one of those things that I felt like there was a complete character arc. I didn't have to work at that because there truly was a character arc. When you write a memoir, you want that arc. You want your memoir to read like, you do want it to read like a novel, like fiction. You don't want to say, I went to New Orleans, I was pregnant. You want to weave everything in there to make it a real
That was probably the first draft, the facts, stick to the facts.
Yes, that was. And I still do that when I write. Mm-hmm. I still do the first drafts, always just the facts, ma'am. And then afterward, I start feeling it and allowing myself to go back into that feeling. I went through some tough times writing that story. Oh, sure. I'd have to set it aside because there were times I'd have to set it down and go away from it for weeks. It was good for me to leave it and then go back with fresh eyes, because you would get so into that story. And I was lucky I had teenage granddaughters at the time. And I would look at them and I would think, oh, that's how I was with my friends. And, they're just teenagers, just like we were, just teenage girls. And this story is about all these teenage girls that are the ones I could remember who were in this place with me. And it was a sisterhood. It really was. I've actually connected with a few of them.
You have, I was wondering if there was ever any way for you to stay in contact with some of the girls there.
There's a secret Facebook page for the alumni of this place that I was at.
Oh, that's
and that helped a lot with my book too, because another thing when you write memoir, you really want to make sure your facts as far as the time period are correct. Yeah. And that's a lot of research. So I like research. So it was fun for me to do the research, but I know a lot of authors kind of hate that part of it, but I didn't. I liked it.
I think memoir writers don't realize the research that it takes too, because even though you're writing from your own memory, it's kind of like, oh, well, what kind of car were they driving back then? Or what was the name of that school? Or what was the location of that, restaurant we were at? So it's like, little research like that, which thankfully in this 21st century, we can go to the internet and pretty much Google anything and we can get the facts pretty quick.
We're so lucky. I mean, in the old days, I'm old. In the old days, there was no way we could have gotten the information we get now. Yeah. I mean, it would have been hours in a library somewhere. But this was so great because I would have a memory and I think, did that really have happened? Am I dreaming this? And so I reach out to these other women and say, do you remember what happened in the laundry? Because I couldn't remember our clothes ever getting washed. And I thought somebody had to wash them. Maybe they washed them. And because I don't think we did. And it was just one of those simple little things in the book that I'm like, what was going on in that laundry? How did that work? So little tiny things like that. You want to make sure you got it right. And then also I would either talk to them or I would Google some of the people who actually ran the place and the time period. I wanted to get my time period right. And I was so lucky that most of my memories were just spot on. Yeah. In fact, I went back for the first time to that building where the unwed mother's home was. It's no longer an unwed mother's home. But I went there with my daughter-in-law. And when I was down in New Orleans visiting them in Baton Rouge, we went down to New Orleans. And sure enough, I I got out of the car. I had to park like a block away so that I could walk up to it, because that's how originally I had walked up to it.
Oh,
And I had written all with my father, and I had written all of the details, and she had read them. And then sure enough, when we went there, oh my gosh.
is it still a home for unwed mothers?
No, it is now apartments.
Okay.
But it still has the plaque on
Yeah.
the building that
And
says it was an unwed mother's home. If
and
those walls could talk.
oh yeah, I was just gonna say, and they're talking through you for sure. And
Yes.
the fact that like when you were there and you said in the beginning, like, oh, they said, you're just here, you're gonna have this baby and you'll forget this ever happened. And
That's how
it goes to show that, yes, people can say that you'll forget this will never happen, but you don't forget,
no.
and your memory was very intact to be able to come up with all your own memory of it, both emotionally and factually, and then to have reality take place at the same time. It's your title of the book is very poignant, but I totally get it.
It was funny because when I was in a writing class, another memoir class, the teacher had said, "What's your working title?" And my working title had been Finding Myself, Finding Jamie, because Jamie was my son's name. I gave him a crib name. We could give our baby a crib name. And so all my life, it was Jamie that I thought of. Of course, his adoptive parents changed his name. But as we're going around the room for the titles, and I realized I had written that so many times in my story, you'll forget this ever happened, because I was told by the minister, by the staff, by my parents. I mean, how could they even think that? They had 4 children. And, then all these people were, and the girls, we would all even say, I'm going to go back to my life. I'm going to go do this. But you never really go back, because you are changed. You are changed.
No, I mean, childbirth changes everyone.
And I also love telling people that you're never too old. I used to think, oh, I wish I could write a book when I was younger. And I was so busy raising children and working full time and just life. I admire young women who write books while they have children, because it was just, we had so many and they were always everywhere and things to do. And I would write in my journal, and then I'd miss months, and then I'd write a little more. So I couldn't even imagine writing a book. So having done this in my 70s has just, it tells me we can achieve anything. I'm doing now what I used to want to do when I was a little girl.
I was just going to say, I think you shared with me something once, and I think it's the coolest thing that, as a child, we have dreams, and sometimes we forget our dreams. I mean, me, I was going to be a Broadway dancer.
Yeah,
well, you still have time on Broadway. And, here, you're in your 70s and you start writing, and will you share with the audience what you had written yourself?
Well, when I was a little girl, I had this dream that, because I was from the time I read my first book, I was addicted to reading. And I was just fascinated by authors. I had no idea what went into writing a book, but I knew that it was special. And I thought, I want to write. My daddy even gave me a desk when I was like 9 or 10 and said to me, someday you'll write me a book. Well, I don't think he planned on this book, but someday you'll write me a book.
Maybe.
And so I had this thing I wanted, but I wanted to be a teacher too, because I love.
Look at you. You're teaching now. You're teaching memoir classes. You're teaching people how, what happened to a mother who gave up their child to adoption, for all these adoptees who were adopted and said, why was I given away? You're giving answers to so many, and you're really teaching a lot. So, you definitely have become the teacher, but becoming that writer and writing the story that, your father said you would write someday. And, who knows, we always have to find those silver linings. And, the fact that you were a young, mother giving birth that first time really did become this book for you.
I know the most tragic things in your life can end up being the most beautiful. And, we can always say that, and it sounds corny, because if you're going through a hard time, you don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's true. And it's never too late. I guess I should say.
Yeah.
It's never too late, because now I'm doing exactly what I thought I wanted to do as a little girl. And it kind of hit me one day that was happening. And I thought, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky that I get to do what I always dreamed that I
Mm,
wanted to do.
that's so awesome. So, Laura, how can someone take one of your classes and have you as a teacher? And more importantly, how can they find your book to read it?
Well, right now I've only taught a few classes in actually in the art of memoir,
Mhm.
but and they've been here locally.
San Diego.
I Yes. And I have resigned from being president of the memoir writers. We are now called the International Memoir Writers, but they have wonderful programs. And I would be more than happy to tell people about the San Diego Memoir Writers, now known as International Memoir Writers, because of Zoom. Because during COVID, we had to go onto Zoom, and we
I don't think I knew that you had changed, because I have been to that International Memoirs writers group on Zoom over the last couple of years, and I didn't realize it was one and the same. So that really does open it up for a lot of people who are interested.
Yeah, it's very easy to get to. It's actually the website for them right now is still sdmwa.org, because it's our old. We've just recently changed to
Okay.
international.
I will include that in the link below, or at least to this file. So if someone's looking for that, and can they go to your website?
Yes, they can go to my website anytime, and I will help anyone. They can contact me.
Okay. And that's lauraengel.com.
Yes, Laura L. Engel.
Laura
So it's
L. Engel.
lauraLengel.com.
All right.
And you can reach out to me anytime. I will tell you classes that would be perfect for you. You can do them on, we do all these Zoom meetings as well as in person. I can let you know what I'm doing, if I'm doing any Zoom classes. And like I said, my classes are mostly just my experience of what I went through and what I learned from writing my memoir, and how I can help you to decide which classes to take, as well as help you I give you prompts, I give you outlines for, I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's like a timeline of your life with prompts. And I make sure I give those away all the time in classes, because there's nothing more special than be able to share your story. We all have a story inside of us, and we all want to hear each other's stories.
We do. Oh, Laura, thank you so much for joining me today. Her book is available on Amazon. You'll Forget This Ever Happened is the title of her book. The Secrets, Shame, and Adoption in the 1960s. Buy her book on Amazon, look her up on her website, get some more information on her. And I want to thank Studio 954 today for making this show possible, along with our sponsor, CRS, and for Laura to come on the show today to give us inspiration and guidance and information about, writing her memoir and writing our memoir too. So again, big thanks to the audience. Thank you so much for joining yWrite today. I am so appreciative to be able to do the show and to talk to so many wonderful people and bring them to you so that you can benefit also. Now, at this point of the show, I do something, Laura, which I call a writing prompt. I like to give the audience a writing prompt. So hopefully, once the show is over, after our credits come up, take out a pen and paper, set your timer for about 10 minutes, and just start writing. And prompts are a really great way to start to get your story out. And for those of you who want to write a memoir, or if you're going to do this in if you're looking about writing that fiction story, I'm going to give you that prompt that, again, we spoke to Laura Engel about, is having that deep, dark secret. Start the sentence off with, I would never tell anyone about this deep, dark secret. And if you don't want to write about your own deep, dark secret, then think about a girl named Sheila and say, I know what Sheila's deep, dark secret is. One way or another, we're going to get those secrets out. So thank you so much for joining yWrite. Have a great day.